my name is Caitlin Bandy, and this is my channel Bandy's Books. And today, Luna and I are here to talk to you about my May TBR. If you're new to this channel and you hear some grumbling or snoring in the background, that's this little girl right here. She loves to pop in and out of my videos, but when you can't physically see her, a lot of the times she's napping in her bed on the other side of the living room, and she does occasionally snore. So don't worry, there's nobody in the background of my video snoring, it's just her. So what do we have going on for May? So for May, I have 3 books left from the current round of the BookTube prize, which I need to finish. I am judging one of the nonfiction groups. I did that last year and really enjoyed it. It put a lot of new nonfiction books on my radar, and I ended up reading about some subjects that I was actually really unfamiliar with, and so it was a great learning process as well. So I volunteered this year for the BookTube prize for nonfiction once again, and I'm really, once again, enjoying it very much. So I read 3 of the 6 books in April, and I have 3 left to go in May. The voting round closes at the end of May. So I can't talk about any of those books while the voting round is open. So I'm not going to mention what those books are or anything here in this video, but just suffice it to say that I do have to read those 3 books by the end of May. Additionally, in May, there is a really cool readathon going on. It is Misery May, and that's hosted by Scott at Gunpowder Fiction Plot and Gemma at Gemma Books. Both of them are phenomenal people and phenomenal channels. We have a lot of very similar tastes, not identical necessarily, but we do have a lot of crossover in what we're reading and a lot of our thoughts and opinions on the things that we're reading. So if you like my channel, you will absolutely love their channels as well. So if you're not following them, please go check them out and give them a follow. I want to say that this is the 3rd or 4th Misery May going on now. I can't quite remember off the top of my head, but I've really enjoyed it every year. It is exactly what it sounds like, a readathon in May that focuses on miserable books. Honestly, the last few years, I have read some books that were like heartbreaking, and it was a great like emotional catharsis reading some of these miserable books. So I'm really enjoying this readathon. I'm excited about some of the books that I've picked out for it this year, and I'm excited to see what everybody else ends up reading for Misery May as well, so I can scope out some books to put on my TBR for next year. And finally, May in the United States is Asian American Pacific Islander Heritage Month, and so I have an entire TBR that is curated of Asian American and Pacific Islander authors. There are some books in here that I'm super excited about reading. Honestly, when I was putting this TBR together, I was just like thrilled. I feel like this is going to be one of those very highly rated reading months. So with that out of the way, let's go ahead and jump into some actual books. I'm going to start with the books for Misery May, and then I'm going to work my way through the rest of the TBR. I have a couple audiobooks that I'm going to talk about first, and then we're going to jump into physical books. First up, I have Flashlight by Susan Choi. So if you've been following this channel for a while, especially if you follow my wrap-ups for each year and my like best and worst reads of the year lists, you will know that Trust Exercises by Susan Choi was one of my worst books of the year a couple years ago. I had hoped I was gonna really love it. It's literary fiction. It had kind of an interesting format. It won a bunch of critical acclaim. Unfortunately, it just was not a book that worked for me. But Susan Choi is releasing her newest novel, Flashlight, in the upcoming month, and I thought I would give her a second try because sometimes, you know, an author is a great author, but one individual book doesn't work for you. This book follows a character named Luisa. One night, her and her father take a walk on the beach. He's carrying a flashlight. He cannot swim. Later, Luisa is found washed up by the tide, barely alive. Her father's gone and presumed drowned. She's 10 years old when this occurs. This is a book that shifts from one family member to the next, flashing back and forth from that night of the drowning, and chases the shockwaves through a family. So far, the hype around this book is pretty positive, and like I said, Susan Choi's previous book didn't really work for me, but it did receive a lot of critical acclaim, so hopefully this one will be something that I appreciate a little bit more. After that, I have White Mulberry by Rosa Kwon Easton. This is set in 1928 in Japan-occupied Korea. 11-year-old Myung has dreams that are too big to be held in by the tiny farming village that she lives in near the country's capital, Pyongyang. She wants to become a teacher, avoid an arranged marriage, and to write her own future. When she is offered a chance to continue her education by moving to live with her older sister in Japan, she is elated. But that decision will mean leaving her sick mother and even her very name behind. This is a book that I came across on NetGalley. It's not one that I've heard a whole lot of review about, but it is a really interesting time period. I've read several books based on Japan-occupied Korea or Korean citizens moving to Japan during this particular time period. I'm very interested to see what this book has to say about it. After that, I have The Fertile Earth by Ruthvika Rao. Vijaya and Sri are the daughters of the Deshmukhs of Irumi. Hailing from a lineage of ancestral aristocrats, the family's social status and power over the villagers living on their land is absolute. Krishna and Ranga brothers are the sons of a widowed servant in the Deshmukh household. When Vijaya and Krishna meet, they form an intense bond that is both beautiful and dangerous. But after an innocent attempt to hunt down a man-eating tiger in the jungle goes wrong, what happens between the two of them is disastrous, the consequences reverberating through their lives into young adulthood. So I've heard really positive reviews of this book. It's been on my TBR for a while, so I'm very excited to listen to the audio of it this month. The first of my physical books for Misery May is Hereafter by Amy Lynn. This is a memoir of Amy's life, her relationship with her husband Curtis, and then what happens to her after he passes away. I've heard very good reviews of this book. I think that this is going to be very heartbreaking and emotional, and absolutely the kind of thing that is appropriate for Misery May, because what could be more miserable than losing the person you love most in the world? After that, I have The Leavers by Lisa Ko. This is the story of Deming. He's 11 years old when this book starts, and his mother goes to her job at a nail salon and disappears along the way. He is left an orphan with no answers of what happened to her. He is eventually adopted by a well-meaning white family who wants him to forget his cultural identity and the memories he has of his mother and move forward. And this book follows his perspective while also counterbalancing with his mother's perspective and the choices that she made. I've heard really good things about this book as well, and I feel like this is going to be a heartbreaker too. And then I have We Measure the Earth with Our Bodies by Tsering, Langzom, Lama. Right away in the description of this book, they compare this to both Homegoing and The Leavers, which I just talked about. I haven't read The Leavers yet, obviously, but I really enjoyed Homegoing, and I think that the comparison of those two books makes me really excited to read this one. I feel like this is going to be right up my alley. So this book starts in 1959 when China invades Tibet, and it follows two sisters as they escape. This book picks up decades later after the sisters have escaped and they've moved on with their life, but they're still haunted by the trauma of the things that they have been through. This sounds really interesting. This was actually a cover buy. I came across this a couple years back at one of my local bookstores, and I thought it was just such a beautiful book. And then I looked at the summary and was even more captivated. The invasion of Tibet by China, these two sisters escaping, this whole like dealing with trauma and identity and everything. These are all things that are really interesting to me. So I feel like this is going to be one of those also very brutal, sad books, but a really interesting one. And then I have Homeseeking by Karissa Chen. This is another book I've been hearing really good things about, but also looks to be potentially very heartbreaking. This follows two young lovers over 6 decades as they are separated, and that intense feeling of love remains. Suchi and Haiwen are very young children when they meet in Shanghai, and they form an intense bond. Their childhood friendship develops into a very deep love that seems to be lasting, but when Haiwen makes the decision to enlist in the nationalist army to save his brother from the draft, Suchi is left heartbroken. The two reconnect decades later, and the story follows that journey. Like I said, I don't read love stories very often, but when I do, this is kind of a typical theme for me, with a love story that's spanning decades where lovers have been separated by unusual circumstance. I think that this could be a very emotional read. Then I have Things We Lost the Water by Erik Nguyen. This follows a family of Vietnamese immigrants who settle in New Orleans. It's a mother and her 2 sons. The sons are dealing with coming to terms with their identity, assimilation into a new culture, and the mother is hoping that her husband is going to follow behind them soon. Eventually she realizes that's not the case, and she tries her best to settle into life in this new city. But then a major disaster strikes the city, and they're forced to come together in new ways. I've heard pretty good things about this. This is an older book on this TBR, one that I've been meaning to read for quite a while, and I'm looking forward to getting into. And finally, I have Trinity, Trinity, Trinity by Erika Kobayashi, translated by Brian Bergstrom. So this is kind of a speculative, literary, dystopian sort of a fiction. I can't really describe this, so I'm just going to read straight from the page. 9 years after the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant disaster, Japan is preparing for the 2020 Tokyo Olympics. An unnamed narrator wakes up in a cold, sterile room, unable to recall her past. Across the country, the elderly begin to hear voices emanating from black stones, compelling them to behave in strange and unpredictable ways. The voices are a symptom of a disease called Trinity. As details about the disease come to light, we encounter a thread of linked histories. Prometheus stealing fire from the gods, the discovery of radiation, the nuclear arms race and the subsequent birth of nuclear energy, and then the disaster in Fukushima. The thread linking these events begins to unravel in the lead up to a terrorist attack at the Japan National Olympic Stadium. So this sounds like it's going to be pretty depressing. I mean, you're talking about a pandemic that affects elderly people, all of these really dense and difficult topics like nuclear power, and the Daiichi Fukushima nuclear accident, and then a terrorist attack. I think that this is going to be pretty brutal. So we'll see. I'm excited to get into this one. I've also had this on my shelf for a while and have been meaning to catch it up. So I'm excited. I've been getting into more translated fiction lately. This is another book that's been on my bookshelf for a little bit. I received it a couple years back, and for some reason it just kind of slipped off my radar, but I've been reading a lot more translated fiction lately, and so I'm very excited to give this one a shot. All right, and now to get into the rest of my TBR. So those books I just talked about were specifically picked out for Misery May. The rest of the TBR is just mood reading for the month. So one other audiobook that I'm really excited to listen to this month is The Lotus Shoes by Jane Yang. This follows a child named Little Flower who is sold into Lin Jing's wealthy family. The intention is for her to become a muizai. In a fit of childish jealousy over her new handmaid's delicately bound feet and skills with embroidery, Lin Jing ensures that Little Flower can never leave her to ascend into society. Despite their starkly different places in the Khong household, over the years, the two girls must work together to secure both of their futures through Lin Jing's marriage. As the two girls grow up, they are by turns both bitter rivals and close friends. So this is another book that I've heard really good feedback about. I love historical fiction, and this one sounds particularly interesting. I love that you have this dynamic between the two girls, the jealousy, and the place in society. I'm very excited to listen to this one, and I think it's going to be a good read. And from there, I have two books by Alkajashi. This one, The Perfumist of Paris, is the third book in the Henna Artist series. I've read the first two books, which I really enjoyed, and I'm very excited to read this one. This follows one of the characters that was introduced, I believe, in the last book as she moves to Paris and starts a new life. Very excited. Paris is a city that I really love. I've been 3 times. I love Alkajashi's style of writing. I think this is just going to be such a cool book. And then just recently, Alkajashi released 6 Days in Bombay. This is a standalone and her first release since completing the Henna Artist series. I'm very excited about this. So this book was inspired by the painter Amrita Sher Gill, who is described as being the Frida Kahlo of India. This book is set in 1937 and moves from Bombay, Prague, London, and Paris, and explores how this famous painter died. I haven't heard too many reviews of this yet, but it also just released like a month ago. I really enjoy Alkajashi's writing, and so I'm hoping this is going to be an excellent read. From there, I have How High We Go in the Dark by Sequoia Nagamatsu. This is described as being for fans of Cloud Atlas and Station 11. I have read Station 11, which I really enjoyed. This is described as a spellbinding and profoundly prescient debut that follows a cast of intricately linked characters over hundreds of years as humanity struggles to rebuild itself in the aftermath of a climate plague, a daring and deeply heartfelt work of mind-bending imagination from a singular new voice. So I have heard a lot of reviews of this book. Some people seem to love it, some people seem to not love it as much. But I think that the people that I've heard from that really enjoyed this are people that tend to have a similar taste in books to me. So I'm hoping I will really enjoy this as well. This was a gift from one of my YouTube subscribers, Elizabeth. So thank you very much for this, and I'm really looking forward to getting into it. And then I have The All-American by Milan Jr. So this book follows 17-year-old Bucky Yee. He is all-American as ever, trying to play football, and really knows nothing about his heritage or his absentee father's home country of Korea. When a misadventure with his adoptive family leads the US government to deport him, he is then dropped in a country that he knows nothing about. He can't communicate. This change means that Bucky has to rebuild himself from scratch, learn a new language, and he sets out on a journey to find his drunken absentee father. So this is a book that I've honestly not heard of before. I came across this on a rack at my local bookstore and picked it up, and reading the description, I was like, oh, that sounds really interesting. That's a unique concept of like what happens if you grew up in one culture and then were suddenly dropped in another culture and forced to survive. So I'm very interested in this. Hopefully it's going to be a really good read. Then I have Bird Milk and Mosquito Bones by Priyanka Mattu. Priyanka Mattu was born in a wooden house in the Himalayas, as were most of her ancestors. In 1989, however, escalating violence in the region forced Mattu's family to flee along with the rest of their community. The home in which her family poured their dreams into was left a pile of rubble. Matu was unfortunately never able to move back to her beloved Kashmir, and over the years her family just kept moving and unpacking and then repacking and moving again. In 40 years, she accumulated 32 different addresses. And in this story, she chronicles her nomadic existence. This was a book that I really hadn't heard anything about. I came across it at a bookstore in San Diego. It was on their nonfiction and memoir display section. I was drawn in by the cover immediately. And then again, reading the summary, I was like, oh, this sounds like a really interesting read. So I've picked it up. And I'm really looking forward to getting into it. I am interested in learning about Kashmir. I don't know that much about it. I'm interested in Matu's story of this nomadic existence. So I'm curious to see what Matu has to say here. Then I have City of Nightbirds by Giaae Kim. So this is the author of Beasts of a Little Land. And that is a book that was one of my favorite books of the year in the year that it released. I want to say it was like 2022. If you haven't read that book, highly, highly recommend it. If you liked Pachinko, you will probably really enjoy Beasts of a Little Land as well. And that turned me onto Giaae Kim's writing. I thought that she was fantastic in the way that she created the story. And this is her newest release. It got picked up by Reese's Book Club. I've been hearing pretty good feedback around it. And this is in a very different setting to her last book, which I'm really excited about. It's 2019 and prima ballerina Natalia Leonova returns to St. Petersburg for the first time in years since a devastating accident that stalled her career. Once the most celebrated dancer of her time, she now turns to drugs and alcohol to numb her pain. She is unmoored by the city as ghosts of her former life swarm her. This sounds really interesting to me. I don't know that much about ballet, but I do know enough to know that Russia is extremely famous for their ballerinas. I'm curious to learn about that cutthroat world of ballet in Russia. Curious to learn a bit more about Russia, as it's a country that I don't know as much as I should about. And I'm really curious to see if this ballerina can overcome her trauma and her past to regain her former glory. As I said, I really like Giaae Kim's writing and I expect to really enjoy this book. From there, we're gonna talk about The Mistress of Bhatia House by Sujata Massey. This is a book that I picked up in the Poison Pen bookstore, and they feature lots of books that are thrillers and mysteries, which isn't necessarily like my primary genre, and in fact I'm quite particular about my thrillers, but this was highly recommended. Several of the staff members in the bookstore said that this was an excellent mystery. This book is set in India in 1922. We have a main character named Parveen who is at a luxurious fundraiser when one of the wealthy guests is set on fire. His servant, a young ayah, rushes to put his flames out. Later, Parveen learns that that servant, who is still ailing from the burns from saving her master, has been arrested on trumped up charges of murder who seem to have been made by a person who doesn't even exist. Parveen, the only female lawyer in Bombay, decides that she must take on the case and puts herself in jeopardy. And then I have Emergency Contact by Mary H.K. Choi. This is a modern romance featuring two people who prefer to communicate across text and web versus actually having to see each other in person. I don't read a lot of romance, but I did think that this one sounded interesting because it is so focused on this like internet relationship. I love that this book is going to explore what that looks like. Then I have Goodbye Vitamin by Rachel Khong. This book follows 30-year-old Ruth, who is recently disengaged and moves home to be with her family. When she gets there, she realizes that things are more complicated than she'd anticipated. Her father, who was a professor, is now losing his memory. Her mother is also smarting from a betrayal. But over the course of the year, the comedy of the situation transforms Ruth's grief. I've heard really good things about this book. I've read Rachel Khong's most recent book, Real Americans, and I actually really enjoyed that, and that led me to want to read some of her backlog. So here we are. I'm hoping that I really enjoy this. Then I have a nonfiction book that's about a subject I know almost nothing about, and I'm actually kind of excited about that because it's a chance for me to learn about something new. I have I'll Love You Forever by Kwon. This is notes from a K-pop fan. I was sent this book recently by Henry Holton Company, so thank you very much to them for sending me this book. I know what K-pop is, and I know a few K-pop bands, but that's about it. Like, I don't know who is super popular in the K-pop world right now. I don't know much about the culture, and I'm really excited to delve into this world and just like get to know it a little bit more. So this book says, Gia Tolentino's Trick Mirror meets Kathy Park Hong's Minor Feelings in a meditation that blends memoir and cultural criticism to explore how the author's love affair with K-pop has shaped her sense of self, charting K-pop's complex coming of age through some of its biggest idols. So this sounds really interesting. I love that this is going to explore Kwon's identity and how K-pop shaped some of that. I love that this is going to delve into some of the famous K-pop groups. I'm just really excited to read this. I think this is going to be a lot of fun and very interesting. After that, I have Chlorine by Jade. This is a book that was highly recommended by my friend Jamie at channel Jamie Kate. She's another phenomenal channel if you haven't checked her out already. She reads a lot of literary fiction and horror, and this one I think is kind of a combination of the both. It's got that like literary horror vibe. So this book follows a character named Renyu, who is a swimmer, and her whole life really revolves around the pool. Her teammates are her only friends, her coach is her guiding light, and if she swims well enough, she could even get a college scholarship. But those are human concerns, and Ren has a secret. She longs to become a mermaid. So this sounds really interesting. It kind of almost sounds like it's going to be like a dark fable. I love this style of book, and like I said, Jamie just raves about this particular book, so I'm very excited to get into it. After that, I have Afterparties by Anthony Veasna So. This is a short story collection that focuses on Cambodian American life. This author unfortunately has passed away since this book was published, but it did receive a lot of critical acclaim and praise, and it is set in Southern California, which is where I grew up. So I expect to see a lot of familiar things within this book. I'm really looking forward to getting into this. I have been on a roll with short story collections, reading so many fantastic ones, so hopefully that's just going to continue this trend. After that, I have 5-Star Stranger by Kat Tang. So this is essentially the story of a man who rents himself out as a stranger to stand in for people's big events, for weddings, for funerals, for baptisms. He can play a father, a husband, a brother, whatever you need him to be. But when a nosy patron threatens one of his long-term jobs, Stranger is forced to confront his own feelings around family and loneliness. This sounds like it could be both funny and kind of sad at the same time. I'm really interested in getting into it. I haven't heard very much about it, but it sounds like a cool premise. And then I have a book called The Bronze Drum by Khong Nguyen. This is a book that I've been really excited to read. This book is set in Vietnam and follows two noble sisters. Their lives and the lives of their people are shadowed by the oppressive rule of the Han Chinese. When the Trung sisters' father is executed, their whole world comes crashing down. With no man to save them and the Han Chinese army encroaching, they rise and unite the women of Vietnam into a powerful army. This novel is historical fiction and based on a true story. I am so excited to learn about this. I love books that feature badass women doing badass things, and like this is a whole story about women fighting back and protecting themselves. I'm so excited to dive into this. After that, I have The Apology by Janine Han. This is a book about an elderly woman who is suddenly pushed into the afterlife as an opportunity for her to reconcile with some of the choices she's made. Pak Jeonga is 105 years old and has always been shouldered with the burden of keeping up the family name. When she sent her daughter-in-law to America to cover up an illegitimate birth, she was simply doing what she needed to preserve the family name. How could she know that decades later, this very decision would return to haunt her? This book was published in 2023, and I've heard some pretty good feedback about it. It's been one that has been floating around on my radar for quite a while, and I happened to come across a copy of this at the Lost Bookstore in Los Angeles. So I went ahead and picked it up. I'm very excited to jump into it. I think that this could be a very interesting read. I really enjoy books like this where you have somebody that's at the end of their life reflecting on the choices that they made. From there, I have the book Martyr by Kaveh Akbar. This is a book that has been getting so much critical acclaim, tons of positive reviews. I've heard nothing but good things about it, to be honest. And I picked it up from a bookstore quite a while back. I want to say I got it here at Buffy's Book Boutique in Las Vegas. And I've been meaning to read it, and I don't know why, it just like keeps slipping off the forefront of my mind, but I'm very excited about getting into this. The plot of this is a little bit complex, so I'm just gonna read the interior flap. Cyrus Shams, the novel's hero, is a young man grappling with an inheritance of violence and loss, a mother whose plane was shot down over the skies of the Persian Gulf in a senseless accident, and a father whose life in America was circumscribed by killing chickens on a factory farm in the Midwest. Cyrus is a drunk, an addict, and a poet whose obsession with martyrs leads him into the mysteries of his past. Toward an uncle who rode through Iranian battlefields dressed as the angel of death to inspire and comfort the dying, and toward his mother, through a painting discovered in a Brooklyn art gallery that suggests she might not have been who or what she seemed. Cyrus is guided on his journey by the voices of artists, poets, and kings, and delivered in the novel's unforgettable final pages to a world that teems with unforeseen wonders. So this sounds very interesting. interesting and unique. I don't know if I've read a book with a description quite like that before, and again, all of the feedback I've been getting around this is that this is a really good read, so I'm looking forward to getting into it. And then I have a book called Disorientation by Elaine Hesed Chu. This book follows 29-year-old PhD student Ingrid Yang. She is desperate to finish her dissertation on the late canonical poet Zhao Wenchu. Once it's done, she vows that she's never going to read anything Chinesey ever again. When she stumbles across a strange and curious note in the Chu archives, she's convinced that it's her ticket out of academic hell. But Ingrid's in much deeper than she thinks. The discovery of this note leads to explosive consequences and eventually leads Ingrid to interrogate some of her own choices. This is a book that I saw popping up quite a bit on Instagram when it was first published. It's one that I've heard really good feedback about. I love the concept for this story and this self-exploration via a PhD thesis. I'm really looking forward to getting into this. I think this will be an interesting read. And then I have Tomb Sweeping by Alexandra Chang. This is a book I picked up from Book of the Month 2 New Years ago, and it was described as the perfect book to start the new year with. It's a collection of short stories that are set across the USA and in Asia. A woman known only to her neighbors as the Asian recycling lady collects bottles from the streets she calls home. An unfulfilled housewife in Shanghai finds a secret outlet for her ambitions in an undercover gambling den. Two strangers become something more through the bonds of mistaken identity. I've been on a short story collection kick. I hope that this one is going to be just as fantastic as some of the others that I've been reading. I love the cover of this, and I'm really looking forward to getting into it. And my final pick for the month is Water Moon by Samantha Soto Yambao. So this one says, on a back street in Tokyo lies a pawn shop, but not everyone can find it. Most will see a cozy ramen restaurant, and only the chosen ones, those who are lost, will find a place to pawn their life choices and deepest regrets. Hana Ishikawa wakes up on her first morning as the pawn shop's new owner to find it ransacked, the shop's most precious acquisition stolen, and her father missing. And then into the shop stumbles a charming stranger, quite unlike its other customers, for he offers help instead of seeking it. Together they must journey through a mystical world to find Hana's father and the stolen choice, by way of rain puddles, rides on paper cranes, the bridge between midnight and morning, and a night market in the clouds. But as they get closer to the truth, Hana must reveal a secret of her own and risk making a choice that she will never be able to take back. So this sounds fantastic to me. I really enjoy fantasy. I think when I first started getting involved in bookish social media, I read a lot more fantasy than I do now, but it's still a very comforting genre for me. So while I think I gravitate more to like literary fiction, historical fiction, horror, things like that, I love to slip in fantasy from time to time. So this is like my fantasy pick for the month. And it sounds so good. I love this idea of this cozy shop where you can pawn your regrets, and I love this adventure. In some ways it kind of reminds me of like a Miyazaki movie. It just kind of has those vibes to me, and so I'm hoping that this is going to be like a very cozy, heartwarming, refreshing type of a fantasy. And I think with all the books that I picked up for Misery May and their difficult themes and things, that this is kind of needed sometimes as a little bit of a breather. So those are all the books that I have picked out for May. I am very excited to delve into them. If you liked the video, hit the thumbs up and comment down below. Let me know A, what you're reading in May, and B, what you think about what I'm reading in May. If you've read any of these books, let me know how you felt about them, whether you loved them or hated them. Just don't post any spoilers, please, because I do want to read them without having plot spoiled. But yeah, tell me all your thoughts, all your feelings. And if you're not already subscribed to this channel, you know what to do. Hit the subscribe button down below, as well as the notification bell, so that you never miss a video, and that way we can see each other again soon. Thanks so much for joining. Bye.